Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I am your host, Stacey Andon, and I can't wait because this episode is all about your Mosaic life with Bridgette Boudreau. And I just want to give a little intro, and then Bridgette, I'll let you fill in the gaps what I miss. I have loved Bridgette since I found her and all of her practical magic out in the world. She is a master certified life coach, business mentor, writer. I don't even think that encompasses everything, Bridgette, because you just are an incredible human. And one of the things that has always drawn me just to people in general is truth and authenticity and just the way you write and speak. It feels every time I read it, I feel expanded because you challenge me maybe to see something or to open my perspective. And yet you also really get to the heart of of the truth, right? Like there isn't just neat little bows in life and wrap everything up. And right before we hit record, we were joking that, there's this thing that kind of goes around social media about how life coaches think everything's happy and wonderful. And that's the thing, but we're like, who's saying that?
Yeah, who is saying that life coaches never have bad days? I feel like we're a collection of hot messes just trying to get better and help other people.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I always like to think about it like as guides, right? We're not the experts in anybody else's life, but these beautiful guides that, hey, we're willing to lean into the messiness of life. And I have to call this out. When I was reading your bio on your website, and you say part Bob Ross, part Mary Poppins. I mean, you speak my language.
yeah,
Practical magic. I'm like, absolutely, I'm all in for that. Because there is something beautiful about kind of Bob Ross's style and Mary Poppins, like she's magical, but then I loved how you had like end spit spot, right? Like we're gonna get
yeah.
shit done.
We're gonna get shit done, and we're gonna go to the magical, mystical realms, but we're also going to, get our bedrooms clean and get the spoonful of sugar down, and all of
Absolutely.
that. And then Bob Ross, I thought, God, I am like the love child of these two people because with him and just his happy little trees and like doing it your
Mhm.
way and really encouraging people to find their own way of creative expression and kind of showing them one way, but not saying this, and then you make your happy little trees. And I thought that's me.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's what draws me, and I think will draw the people that work with you and draw new people that are listening today to you is that there is this beautiful encouragement, but it's not like this is the only way or the way. How do I help you discover what yours is in a way that feels nurturing too, right? Rather than I don't know, the way we were most of us on the planet were raised didn't feel nurturing. It was like, you're going to figure out the way and let me tell you what it is.
Yeah, and you'll be an accountant or an
Yeah,
engineer, or what are you
yeah.
going to do with your college degree? And I'm so glad. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here,
Oh,
Stacey. I adore
good.
you. The feeling is mutual, and just I always feel like your light just shines. Um, I was going to say brightly, and it's of course it's bright, but there's just like a it's it's like this purity and
Mhm.
consistency and a groundedness. It's not like, come be in my light. It's like, hey, I'm here shining
Mhm.
my light, doing my thing, and come on in. And you know what? It's nurturing as well.
It
And I
is.
think that's such an important component. I'm not here to shake anybody up,
Mhm.
or I've just learned, when I first trained as a coach, it was kind of all about that. Get in there and
Yeah.
you find out the problem and you crack your client open in 20 minutes or less and give them a better thought and send them on their way. And,
Mhm.
you know, that is just so antithetical to what
Yeah.
I know now, which is um, I'm more aligned with somebody like Parker Palmer, who talks
Mhm.
about creating this space, whether it's a group, whether you're working individually with somebody or just with yourself,
Mhm.
creating this space where the soul feels safe to emerge.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
just think, oh, isn't, because if we create that space, I trust and believe that people will do their own work and the soul knows on a certain level what needs to be done. And so all I'm doing is creating that space and that support to help people emerge.
I love this. And I've never thought of it exactly like that, but you're right. There is this question of, does it feel safe for the soul to emerge? And so many of us have a human experiences or some kind of something that probably along the way it didn't feel safe. So how do we nurture that instead of like kind of beat it or shake? I love that. I get it because again, there is so much of that even now today, that energy. And it's like, oh wait, no, I don't want to. Please don't shake me.
Yeah, it's like we try to beat ourselves or, into finding our way to our ideal lives or beating ourselves into our quote best self. And it's
Yeah,
like, how does that work? It
yeah,
doesn't work
it
at all, but
doesn't.
that's the way that we've been taught,
Yeah.
is put that pressure on, keep our nose to the grindstone, whatever
Mhm.
it is. And then hopefully someday, if you do that enough, you'll be the best version of yourself. But
Yeah.
like, how
You'll get
could
there.
that possibly
Wherever
work?
there
Yeah,
is.
you'll get there. And it's like, no, you have to start with the love.
Yes, yes, we're so
Yeah,
aligned on that one. It reminded me again, I was enjoying reading your bio, and it was first of all, I love your tagline, "Coaching for people who give a damn." I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
totally." And there's this element when you were talking about your own life, about, how you created this, and we're gonna get into this juiciness of the Mosaic life framework, but how you created it, you had to go through this whole process of surrendering control, which I think all of us, I mean, you said it best, recovering control freak. It's like, absolutely. And so my soul probably was like hiding in the corner because the rest of me was trying to control everything. And I love how you blended that then with like, then you became an accidental student of your life. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that, because to me, that's just a beautiful way of kind of experiencing it and going through it and then explaining it in a way that was like, oh yeah.
yeah. So I came up with this Mosaic life purpose framework, and it's using the metaphor that your life is like a mosaic, right?
Mm,
So the way that I think we've been taught to approach life purpose or living
mhm.
purposefully, or maybe not even taught, but we just sort of we're not taught, so we just go like, what is it? You
Yeah,
know, you, you
totally.
feel that purpose alive inside of you. You feel something. You feel drawn, but and then it's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And some people know right away. They get that burning bush. I'm going to be a gymnast, or I'm going to be
Mhm.
president of the United States, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And there are those people that know, and then there are the rest of us. And I definitely fell into that category, and I always felt that feeling, and I wanted to lead a purposeful life, whatever that meant for me. I just really felt hungry for that. And I kept, thinking, what should I do? What is it? How does all this add up? I would just constantly I would grab onto something. And,
Mhm.
I want to be a coach. Like, I see so many coaches do this. So I talk about things that ping for you, right? Those things
Yeah.
that light you up or just kind of perk up your
Mhm.
interest. And so I trained thousands of coaches in my day, and they would come in and they would, oh, coaching is it. This is it. And
Mhm.
so it was pinging for them so strongly. And then they would be so disappointed because they would, then all they would do is fall into the coaching mold.
Oh,
So, you know, uh, what that looked like was setting up your therapy style coaching practice or becoming
mhm.
kind of a cult of personality, or, there was basically only so many ways to be a coach
Yeah.
in the conventional wisdom. And so what happened was people departed this conventional path, but then they fell back into it.
That's
Um,
a really good way of explaining that. I never thought about it that way, but that's so spot on.
yeah, so in this example, and there's many, this is just the one
Yeah.
that's personal to me, but I think everybody can relate to that. So what and I did the same thing. It's like, oh, I'll be this, I'll be that, and
Mhm.
wanting to put a title on it. And finally, just after being knocked around by life, a bunch of times and in a bunch of different ways, I just kind of started to say, show me, you know, show me. And then I would, um, and then I was just started, and I wasn't doing this consciously, I was just doing it unconsciously, but I would talk to friends, I'd go, well, there's this piece, and there's this piece, and there's this piece, and there's this piece. And what it came to me actually over chicken parmesan with my partner Steph as I was getting ready to head off to Africa to lead a retreat is I said, oh, your life purpose is like a mosaic. So instead of this crisp picture,
Mm.
or title, it's like imagine if you were making a mosaic and you didn't know exactly what the image was that you were going to make at the end, but instead you were starting with the pieces that you were drawn to, right? So it's like, oh, I like this beach glass and I like this button. And oh, I broke apart this pottery and here's a beautiful shard from that. And
Oh,
then, so you don't try to make it all add up. First, you gather the pieces, and the pieces are what pings for you. And so, this really ties to your idea of everyday enchantment because I also, too, love the idea of everyday enchantment. And when I started living this way, it also made everything feel a lot more magical because the
mm.
pieces can be very mundane, but they can also be magical. They can be synchronicities, they can be
Mhm.
signs and symbols, right? So
And they
you
don't
start,
have to be just like one big gesture, which is
no,
like,
it's
right,
just
like the whatever
little.
the final picture, or whatever you're thinking all the pieces need to be, there's magic and synchronicity and enchantment in every little part of whatever this is that you're creating. I love this. I don't know, to me,
Exactly.
it's pinging me.
Exactly. And that is what makes you feel on purpose right now. You don't have to
Mm.
wait because you get so involved
Mhm.
with you. That's kind of the secret of the mosaic is you get
I love
so
it.
involved with the pieces and experimenting with them. Okay, so the first part of the mosaic is gathering the pieces. So you're what's pinging
Okay.
for you, but you're also taking from your limitations and your failures.
Mm.
You're kind of breaking those apart again. Imagine that as a
Yeah.
plate that you're breaking apart, you're deconstructing it and taking, like, instead of saying, oh, I'm a failure and I suck, it's like, how was this situation not good for me? What
Yeah.
was not good about it? What do I need instead to
Yeah.
make a better situation? Or do I need to just stay away from that entirely?
It
So,
becomes information
yes,
rather than a judgment about my own capacity or capabilities, and I mean, Bridget, you're totally speaking my language.
yeah.
I
And then
love
those are,
this.
and your limitations, you start to recast that. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
that's where life is closing the door behind me. Life does
yeah,
not want me to go that way. And it sucks sometimes because you're like, oh my God, that was my safe space. And now I don't have
mhm,
it. And that feels really
mhm.
scary. But so this helps you sort of understand what life is trying to show you about that experience so that you can start to move forward.
I love that, and that is very one of my favorite Parker Palmer quotes, right? "Let life show you before you tell it," or whatever, something along
Yes,
the lines of that, the essence of that very much. And tell me what you think as I was listening to you. I think so many people, and I mean, I have clients too, they want to know what their purpose is. Like, it's this big project of figuring it out, and I'm like, "What if you don't" I always say, "What if you don't need to know? Like, what if it's all okay? What if you're already living it?" If you look around, it's almost kind of, like, looking at all the things that you're already that, you love, that light you up in your life. What if you can't help yourself? Yeah, there's definitely the moments where things didn't go so well, and those can be pieces of information, but I always think, like, it's already hiding in plain sight almost for all of us.
that's exactly it. It's like the air we breathe and the water we swim in. And so we
Mm.
don't see it. And so
Mhm.
part of the gathering the pieces process is attuning your attention, which
Ah,
means to start to be able to notice how your
mhm.
purpose is right in front of you. So as you start
Yeah.
to notice what pings for you. And the other thing that makes it hard for people to notice what's right in front of them is that whole thing of trying to make it all add up into something because
Mm.
it's like you're cutting off all the information that life wants to give you. And so if you
Mhm.
just start with the pieces and go, oh, like, and you don't have to, they never have to make sense. Like some of my mosaic pieces are, I love maps, I love rocks, I love You know, I just took up knitting and I like doing that, but I stay curious, you know, like taking up knitting. I I know enough about myself now to know that it's not about making fancy stuff for me. It's
Mhm.
about keeping my hands busy so I don't look at my phone.
Ah.
So I don't care. I do the knit stitch. That's it. I'll probably make scarves and pot holders
It's
forever.
fun.
I don't.
I've done
Yeah,
that. Baby
yeah,
blankets or whatever. You can start
yeah.
in this place where you can make a lot of stuff with just like 1 or 2 stitches.
Exactly. So the shift that you were kind of getting to is instead of the question that sort of underlies what's my purpose and
Mhm.
is what should I do, right? What
Yeah.
should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And
Mhm.
so the fundamental question is actually who am I?
Ah.
And so that's also a big question. So the
That's
gathering
a
of the
question.
pieces is the breaking down of who am I
Mhm.
into what pings for me, you know, looking at your experiences and all that stuff, and then starting to create this sort of vague image of the mosaic, which becomes clearer through experimentation, because that's the other thing where people get stuck. I see you
Oh, I'm
responding.
like lighting up because I'm also thinking when people are thinking, what should I do? Am I doing it right?
Oh, am I doing it right?
Right? That
There's all
there's
kinds
all
of
that wound
terrible
up in there too.
there's all kinds of terrible questions that go with that, you
Mhm.
know. Am I doing it right? Why do I always do that? You
Yeah.
know, and
Versus
those,
who am I? And to me, I love how you just said all the pieces don't have to fit together. Because I always talk about just in my own kind of everyday enchantment, it's like, what are the pieces that are the messiest that you don't want everybody to know about? Those are absolutely like hidden superpowers or gifts and gems. But we have been, again, so conditioned to your point about like, what is this? And it needs to have this lofty, visual, whatever final picture of what it's going to be. We get so lost in kind of chasing or, trying to get there somewhere out in the future that we miss so much that's already right here with us. So that just absolutely, I hear people saying that to me all the time. Am I happy? And maybe I'm not doing right, like all of that. Then, and it just becomes what I call kind of like a swirl or the hamster wheel or what have you. And nobody ever goes anywhere and then just feeling kind of stuck.
yeah, those are questions that like kind of close you, you know, and
Mm.
yeah, exactly, put you in
Mhm.
a loop. And so questions that, you know, who am I? Show me what things for me.
Break
These are
it.
questions that open you, yeah,
Yeah, break the
open you up.
pieces.
Yeah, and break them apart. Be super curious. Get down into the details. And the other thing is that people try to make themselves into something different
Mm.
rather than, you know, back to that question, who am I? Who am I? How? So the kind of the three pieces of that are, you know, what pings for you? So the
Mhm.
three components I believe to sort of hit the mark on purpose or a job or anything is
Mhm.
um, what you're doing. So
Mhm.
in this case, it would be what things for you, how you do it, and the third one is who you do it with and for. And all of those have to be. I always say it's like the dials on an equalizer, except for nobody who's
You
younger
have
is
your
going
own
to know what an
frequency, right?
equalizer is,
Yeah.
but
Oh, that's true. Bridget
yeah,
was busy with the equalizer too, but you're right. There's people like, "What are they talking about?"
yeah. So kids, an equalizer was this thing that you could balance out the sound. I guess you still have it in
They
your
still I just took
stereo
my
or
nephew
something.
to Daniel the Tiger, the other day, and they did have a big equalizer at the back of the stage. Whether anybody was noticing, but I definitely took a nod to it.
Yeah. So it's like all of those have to be at a high level. You know, think
Mhm.
about it. If you've had a job that was like, oh, I had a great boss, but I hated what I was doing,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I've tried every iteration of that, but so you have to understand yourself on all three of those levels. And on the how, you know,
Mhm.
people uh, try to fit themselves into the mold of what our society says. Like you should be able to sit still and focus perfectly
Yeah,
and be perfectly organized and da 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 da.
yeah.
And so once you start to say like, no, I don't. I have so many clients that have ADHD. So it's like I have ADHD. I
Right.
can't sit still and I can't focus. But that doesn't mean you're damaged. It just means that you have to find your way of
Yeah.
doing things and then create your life around fitting that rather than you trying to fit into some mold of a certain
Yeah.
kind of life.
Hey, I've got to fit all these pieces into whatever this is that I imagine will be accepted and even like I will be loved, I will be rejected out on the island, right? That I'm always worried about that. Although, just like you, I've always felt like I can fit in if I, right? Like I can very much be comfortable in places, but there has always been a part of me that felt a little bit, I don't even know what the right way of describing it is, like kind of on the outside. And then I kept just feeling this pull like, well, if I want to be accepted, if I want to find success here, I've got to figure out what, what the mosaic of the world is telling me to do versus my own. And interestingly enough, like I'm imagining breaking plates and having fun with this whole
Yeah,
process, Bridget. And
yeah,
it's like, that's what I've done in my life. I mean, maybe not always on purpose, but I absolutely, to me, things have to break sometimes, like in order to break open and to realize like again it doesn't have to fit into some perfect you know and piece masterpiece in order for it to have meaning and purpose for me. And I think that's a newer belief for us to embrace or think about versus this like again there's this destination and we our job is to figure it out, and if you don't somehow you haven't you haven't done life right.
yeah. So, and that's where the relief comes for people, and they
Mm,
start feeling on purpose right now because they're just playing with the pieces. So then that's where having an attitude of experimentation is so important, because the next place where people get stuck is like, oh, I'm really interested. Let's take coach. I'm really interested in becoming a coach,
mhm,
and then there's this should I or shouldn't I?
mhm.
Should I or shouldn't I? Or I had a client that wanted to move, and she was, well, where should I move? Should I or shouldn't I? And I said, well, how do you know where to move? Like, you need to come up with a step between,
Yeah,
a step that gets you
absolutely.
started. So for her, it was about, I said, well, why don't you actually identify some places?
Mhm.
What's your criteria? Identify some places and visit them and spend some time there and come up with your finalists. And it seems so obvious when you say it that way, but it's such a
Yes.
again, I think it's something that comes from our culture that has prevented us from being experimental. And so it's always this: do I commit or do I not commit?
Mhm.
And so the step before do I commit is, what are the experiments that you're going to run that give you that information?
Yes.
Because as I always say, movement creates clarity.
Ooh,
So
I
you
love
have to generate that movement,
Mhm,
and that's where the pieces start to coalesce.
mhm. When you ask that question, because you're right, that step in being experimental is so important. I think just in, if nothing else, if a listener gets that and takes that away, that is like just the most beautiful nugget of wisdom. And I think just from being a former teacher, it's like we don't set the systems up that way. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of science experimenting, but I feel like for the most part, there was not experimenting. There was you were working to get the right answer. And then you
Yes,
were looking to the teacher, the expert, or what have you to tell you what it was. And it's funny because even when I became a coach, I still had that model in my head. I need some other expert or guru to tell me that I'm doing coaching right versus realizing like there isn't anybody who's going to do exactly the what I'm doing the way I'm going to do it and trusting my own self. There's this like you bring the sovereignty back within and you bring
yes.
this trust, right? There's this new relationship you have to build with yourself along the way.
And how did you figure that out? By practicing coaching and
Exactly.
and by getting that feedback and going, oh, this is going great. It really
Yeah.
works well when I do XYZ, and it's terrible when I do
Yes.
ABC. That's how you find out.
And
And
being
it,
honest about it, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And if you make every session about I'm a success or I'm a failure,
Mhm.
which I did when I was first a coach. And let me tell you, the wheels will fall off so fast it'll make your head spin. And instead, it's letting yourself be a learner. And you're so right, like the school system is not set up that way. And what a weird way to try to live life. Can you imagine, having to make some kind of critical decision out in the world? Let's say you're stranded on a desert island and you're with a group of people. Is the way you're going to survive by trying to figure out the answer and then seeing if some authority figure agrees? Or are you all going to work together as a group and try some things and talk about what happened and try some other things and divide by expertise and talents and skills and,
Yes.
figure it out? But we're not, and that's exactly it. We're not really taught how to figure things out.
Exactly, except for problem solution.
Yeah.
And not that, again, if you were stranded on an island, there is some, but to me, expansive, right? Your experimental sounds very much like me, like get more curious, take a
Yes.
pause and get the information. Go out if you don't have enough to make a decision, to your point, that's okay. Like go out and get some more information and find it out for yourself, because the more I think we do that, actually we're going to create better community that way than everybody
Mm-hmm.
kind of in this kind of mass think that really hasn't learned those skills that could be really beneficial to each other, in ways that I think we're just starting to get, maybe, or some of us explore that in more depth, going, wait a second, this isn't working.
Yeah, and that's my kind of Pollyanna pipe dream vision is
Mhm.
I believe, and I hope I'm not naive in believing it, but that when people feel more aligned to their purpose right now, that's a net positive benefit to the
Yeah.
world.
Absolutely. You can't show up for other people or the world at large, I don't think, until I think that I always say the journey starts within. You start
Mm-hmm.
with yourself, and as you do, I think everything flourishes around you as you give yourself permission, again, to be experimental, then you get to allow other people to be in that space too, and there's such a beautiful, again, to me, I don't even know what the word is for that, but there just becomes this, like, again, way more curiosity rather than, everybody telling everybody what to do. Like, okay, that might
Yeah,
not be working so well.
there's a lot less self-judgment.
Mm,
If you can get curious and explore and
mhm.
even connect with some enchantment, it
Yeah.
dials down the self-judgment, which I think creates more space for other people.
I think your whole process just oozes enchantment, because if you
Yes.
really do want to get that, you want your soul to emerge, you want to do it in a practical way. How do you do it? Like I love this process. It's simple, it's practical. There's magic woven all the way through it. If somebody was listening and you just wanted them to pull one thing out of our conversation together today, what would you say that is? Like, what would you want somebody to take away or start with?
I think start with noticing what pings for you right now in your life today. Don't try to make it add up to anything. Just note them down, write them down.
Mhm.
Because one of my workshop participants, she said, and she has this Australian accent. I wish I could do it. I won't. But just imagine Australian accent. And she says, you put these little bits down, because I actually have people make a little paper representation of their mosaic. And she said, you put these little bits down and then they start talking to each other. And that's so true. And so, yeah, just start there. I think adopting that experimental mindset is the other piece as well.
I love it. So, Bridget, if somebody's like, yes, which I don't know why they wouldn't be like, yes, let me swim in Bridget's practical magic pool. How could I know I'm going to list everything in the show notes, but just on kind of if people are listening, where do you want them to go to connect with you? What's the best place to find out more and get excited about if they want to know and they want to learn this framework with you? What
Yes.
where can they
So
get started?
bridgetteboudreau.com. But the thing that I'm most excited about is I have my new course that's just launched, and it's called Live on Purpose Now, No Waiting. And it's
Ooh.
like no bullshit, stripped down online course, self-study, but I designed it so you can finish it. And so it's like, I've been saying it's like, those online recipes where you have to read through, like, this is my grandmother's recipe from Portugal,
Scroll
and da, da,
down.
da, and you're like, scroll
Scroll
to the
down.
recipe, skip
Where is
to
the
the recipe.
recipe?
This is skipping to the recipe.
I love it.
Yeah,
I
so
love
this
it.
is my skip to the recipe, and of course I offer coaching support to go deeper, but these tools are simple, but they're really profound. And so I want people to be able to, and the price, it's $125. So
Oh, no brainer.
I just want to make it a no-brainer. Get in there, you can get
Do it.
this done, and then you're on your way. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm really, really excited about that. And this has been like 4 years now of me working with the Mosaic, teaching people. So it's just like distilled down
Yeah.
to just
Well,
the,
you're practicing
yes,
law for us, which
yeah,
that to me is some of the best like life example. These are the people that I find drawn to, the people who are living what they're absolutely teaching and sharing and speaking and writing of. They're actually in it because you can really tell, I think, when somebody's disconnected from what they're speaking of and
yeah,
what they're actually how they're actually showing up in life. I love when it all clicks because to me, those are the people that I'm like, I want to learn from that person. I want to learn more about whatever that person knows. Again, that's going to help support me in my journey. Maybe puts a clear piece for me or helps me put some of these pieces. I cannot say how much I love about the pieces talking to each other.
they do. And then
I love it.
the third piece is everything, there's not, things will start to coalesce, right? So you do
Yeah.
these you find your pieces, you do some experiments, things will start to coalesce, they will come together. And
Mhm.
that feeling of like, oh, there it is. But it
Yeah.
could be as simple as taking up knitting, or,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing. And yes, the mosaic was born of my own mosaic, and it has been created absolutely in the mosaic style. So it's very meta in that respect.
Totally. Well, it
Yeah.
reminds me, and I think I might have quoted this in another podcast because I don't know why, but this quote's really it keeps coming to mind for me is Wayne Dyer's "Don't let the music die within you." It's like this. That's a beautiful quote, but how do people actually figure out what the music is and put it out into the world? To me, here's the practical framework for how you do it. And it's not going to be overcomplicated because, again, a lot of times when you think about courses or other programs, it's like 3 year intensive. And then I would have, and it's like, I don't know. There's something about the pandemic. And again, to your point about the rest, like jumping, I don't want all of that.
No, I don't think people, I mean,
No.
that's one experience, but I just want people to have a really simple entree that is doable, and um, there's worksheets and all that jazz, but it's like once you learn how to do this, it's with
Mhm.
you. So you don't need to take all that stuff. It's there when you want it and when you need
Yeah,
it, when you want to play around with it. But this will live inside of you. And honestly, I to me the mosaic just describes our natural way of navigating and understanding the world.
I love it. So I'm just going to put this out here for future because I was a former teacher. What you need to like bring this to this. Well, the school system, in my opinion, needs a complete overhaul. But wouldn't it? I worked with middle school and high schoolers. So, like, to me, instead of like the old school testing of like, I'm a this, I'm a that. I'm just imagining, Bridget, maybe this is
Oh,
not where you want to go, but I'm just thinking like, what just across the globe learning this program when you're young and this style and this approach, it would just totally change. I think I see it in the high school age children that I know. There's still so much pressure. What are you doing? How are you going to figure it out? You need a major when you're a freshman in high school. It's like, what?
Oh, I love that idea so much, and I just
Gotta
got
go to
so excited as you were talking about it. And imagine going to college and having this framework of the Mosaic, and so you're taking classes, and what if the college even supported it, and instead of like some stupid evaluation at the end of each
exactly.
course, it was like, what did you learn about your limitations? What did you learn about who you are, what you like to do, and who you like to do it with? And so, like, group projects became
Mhm.
that. And, so
Oh,
by the time it comes to declare a major, maybe that's just like, these are the places where I want to go deeper into my experiments.
yes. And it makes sense too because there's so often I love biology and then I love art history. And what we got was, hey, those two things can't live together. But in the Mosaic framework, they absolutely could live together. Bridget, I know I'm just getting way excited here, but I see this beautiful potential for this framework to change, again, your life at that age. I totally could see it in the college setting or any in other settings, even in high school as well, too. The reflection piece and the thinking about it and just the mindset shift around schooling and classes kind of reminds me of John Dewey, who was one of the founders of education. He was all about following your ping, he didn't call it that, and experimenting and getting data. And then, he wasn't about you need to take this class and that class. It was like, no, follow that, and that will give you the education that is going to be like a perfect fit for you. It's going to look different for each of us.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, like
There we go.
I would
I'm
not
ready.
be
I
I would
put me
not be
out.
opposed. I love that idea. And also you hit on another thing too, is the Mosaic does help you put together these things that felt dichotomous, right?
Yes.
So I love
Yeah,
biology, and what does somebody do? Oh, you should be a biologist. But the
absolutely.
person's like, well, but I also really love art history.
Mhm.
You know, this is how you start to create something that is uniquely you, and perhaps that the world has not seen yet, but the world
Yep.
needs. And I think
Yeah.
we're going to need a lot more of that as we move into this,
I couldn't agree
wild
more.
future.
And I could talk to you forever.
I
Because
know, I'm
I'm like,
having a
"Oh,
great
we just
time.
cracked open a whole new angle here, and I'm all
I
in."
know, I'm off to talk to McGraw Hill.
Right? I mean, you let me know. I'll be one of your spokespeople for, this let's get this program piloted.
Yes, I love it.
All right. Well, thank you as always. It is such an honor just to spend time and just again, I love to listen and I love to be like to me this podcast and all the enchantment is all about hearing different perspectives and ideas and what people are doing just to get us excited. Again, maybe it's not exactly what I want to do, but it's this idea then I get inspired to go find my ping or to think about things from maybe a like completely new way that I hadn't thought about since, this morning. And I just love that about these conversations. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been so great, and I love always chatting with you.
Ooh,
And I love that you're doing this
do it
show.
again. When you are across the nation, across the globe, and the Mosaic frame, we're going to be like, remember
I'll
when
come back.
remember when I pinged that idea? I was like, yes. Sweetness. Thank you again.
Thank you.
That's it for now, loves. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Get all the juicy details and links we've mentioned in the show notes. If learning more about how you can use your own enchantment to live a oh hell yes life, come get your own coaching session with me by going to staceyandon.com and signing up for my homepage. And as always, come chat with me about this topic and all things enchantment in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. See you on the flip side.